There are some very important things about this palette that I want to share before you decide to buy it. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, and yes, we're back at it again with the wet hair after showering after getting home from work, but I had a video that I wanted to film right now. This video is going to be centered on the Alter Ego Artemis palette. In the monitor, it was hard for me to read this backwards. Like, I thought it said Temptress, but Temptress is another one of their palettes. But this is the Artemis palette. It is the shade for shade dupe of the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette, and it's available now for $22 on the Alter Ego site. Yes, I am wearing very creepy bright blue colored contacts to honor the bright blue pop of color in this palette as well. So I wanted to have one on my face, and I did use this palette for the look today. I will show you more about it later, but essentially I wanted to play with the more copper bronzy tones because typically I don't like orange eyeshadow on me, but all it took was having blue eyes and I think it looks really nice. In this video, I'm going to be doing a couple things. Firstly, I'm going to say a couple very noteworthy things that I noticed upon first impression. Secondly, I will show you arm swatches of every single shade in this palette. And thirdly, I will show you how I created my eye look today using it. And then I will give some final thoughts. A little bit more detail about this palette. It contains 28 shades, and it's really not that large for containing that many shadows. For example, here I have my So Jaded palette, and this is 30 shades, and there's not even really a ton of wasted room in here, but the size difference between these two is significant. Another thing that shocked me, literally when I open my box. Okay, so I need to tell y'all that Alter Ego sent this my way. Any YouTuber, influencer who tells you that receiving a product for free or receiving PR doesn't influence their decision and they're still going to give you their honest review and so on and so forth, that is a lie. I don't doubt that many of the people that we love and enjoy watching do give their honest thoughts and review on the product itself, but receiving a product without paying the retail price for it, it removes the opportunity for a very important emotion that cannot be ignored in the actual purchasing population, and that is a feeling of regret spending money on that makeup. Now, I know this feeling way too well. I wanted to say this because although I'm going to give you the most objective findings, meaning based on all the senses that I have holding this palette that y'all can't really share with me, I am also self-aware enough to recognize that I can't experience that feeling of regret spending money on something. I also want to emphasize here that never can I sit here in good conscience and review something and tell y'all that you have to buy it, because you don't. For me to say this is worth it and that you should get it means nothing, because I don't know what worth it is to you. For example, let's say that I got the actual Natasha Denona Metropolis palette for $129 and I got it in PR. For me to say that the formula is unlike any other, which it might be, and that the color scheme is really unique and innovative, which it might be, and that you should try it, I wouldn't have spent $129 on that. But if you do, you could be in a place in your life where $129 means food for the month, or $129 means a car payment, or $129 means diapers and baby clothes. You know, although I am grateful for this, and although I am going to do my very best to separate myself from any subjective or emotional response from receiving this, I don't want to ignore the fact that there is an inevitable part of this experience of having this palette that I'm missing. Now onto some of the objective things about this palette. This palette, when I first took it out of the box, surprised me a lot, because literally when I lifted it out of the box, I was like, whoa, this is so heavy. The packaging on this is seriously, I think that this is the best packaging on any of my eyeshadow palettes, because my Pat McGrath one is not the full-size Pat McGrath, it's the 6-pan one, so it has that annoying unwrapping, and then you open the sides of the door, and then you have the 6 shadows with a mirror. So this packaging is sturdier and more reliable and less annoying than that. And my Tarte Tartelette in Bloom and Tartelette Toasted palettes have the really nice like clapping metal closure and like the mirror that stands up. But this feels very luxe, and I kind of like that it's not metal. Now, when I tell you this is heavy, let me tell you the numbers. I weighed this on my food scale that I use when I ship out like random things, and this came out to be 12 ounces. Now, that doesn't mean anything until we compare it to other stuff. This is just what I would consider a normal palette. This is a ColourPop Dream Street palette. Sub in any one of their 12 pan eyeshadow palettes, and this weight came out to be 5 ounces. 12 ounces, 5 ounces. And the size of it is roughly half the size of this Artemis palette. Now let's consider the So Jaded palette that I was holding up earlier. This palette is much larger than the Artemis palette, but this one weighs in at 10 ounces. So if you can imagine, just try to bring yourself to the same place with me where you're holding this smaller product that weighs more. It's heavy. Doing my makeup, my hand was kind of tired actually holding it up, but I very much like this. The second thing I like, and these two things are the top things that I like about this palette, and it's not about the eyeshadows. Many of y'all may have found me through my Duping New Palettes series that I do, and to my utter delight, these palettes, or these eyeshadows, pop out just like ColourPop eyeshadows do. So let me just pick a random one to pop out. You just need something thin. I am using this really dull old knife. I actually have a depotting tool that I just got in the mail. I really should open it, but we're creatures of habit. I just reached for the same thing I usually use. So sorry if this freaks you out, but I'm taking my little knife and running it along the side, and it comes right out. And that is the same for all of these. Now, for most people, that probably doesn't mean anything and doesn't add any value to the palette, but I love rearranging my palettes, picking some shades from here and there to put together something that I want to create. And so this is very exciting to be added to my small collection of palettes that I'm able to do that with. Okay, now let's talk about the eyeshadows and the swatches. I'm gonna put up the footage of the arm swatches here, and in this first shot, you see all of the shades in the top 2 rows. So I'll read out the names to you from left to right. We have Hunt, Provoke, Entice, Obscure, Ravage, Catch, Trap, Silent, Scent, Camouflage, Victory, Stalk, Quiver, and Snare. The names of this palette are themed to hunting, and Artemis is like the arching something in Greek mythology. Don't kill me, any Greek mythology or whatever culture and timeline that Artemis belongs to stands out there. The swatches look really good, but I did have to build up some shades, and I want to note a couple things about the formula, but let me show you the swatches of the second row. These are the bottom 14 shades, and the names of those shades from left to right include Thrill, Spear, Chase, Pursuit, Captivate, Pluck, Bow, Ambush, Prowl, Stealth, Pounce, Lure, Conquer, and Quest. A lot of the very deep, dark looking shades in this palette from the pans actually go onto the eye or swatch, or however you're going to actually use them, goes onto the skin much lighter and much brighter than they would appear to. So here are some of those shades that I'm talking about, like these 3, which to me seemed like most of the exciting kind of dark, colorful shades that isn't just a dark brown. They can show up to be very bright, especially if you're just doing one sheer layer of it or blending it in. Now, things about the formula that I think are important to know before you try to work with it and have your expectations for it. There are a lot of different formulas within this palette, but most notably, and the one that kind of surprised me the most, are the mattes. Many of the dark mattes don't feel powdery. They feel like a putty. They have a putty texture. If you can see Quiver, Trap, Thrill over here. I don't know if you'll be able to see on camera, but there's kind of an indent into them, I smushed a putty eyeshadow. That really is a texture. It doesn't even get on the brush really like a powder. And so naturally, the creamier an eyeshadow is, sometimes it gets harder to blend when you're using a brush. I think that these will be stunning, as someone who loves to use my fingers to apply my eyeshadow, to like swipe just all across my lid and blend it up with my finger, and then maybe throw shimmer on the lid, maybe not, and put on some mascara and head out the door. But if you come into using these shadows with the expectation for them to perform as like a ColourPop matte eyeshadow, which is more powdery, you're gonna have a little bit of a hard time. You can also see Lure here. This is what I use to kind of define the outer corner of my eye. You can see like the marks where I stuck my liner brush. I actually feel like all of the mattes are that formula except for Hunt and Entice, because using a brush with these, I did have some powder, so it is a normal powder matte formula. The shimmers and metallics in this palette work very well, especially with your finger. I always apply shimmers with my finger because I know that is usually how I'm gonna get the best metallic reflectiveness and payoff. I can't really speak to how these work with a brush because I haven't had that experience yet, but I think that these shimmers just glide on. There's no skipping. It's very creamy. They're very easy to like rub in. If there is a little bit of the flakes of pigment that come off, you can just rub it in and it smooths out like a cream. Does it feel like Pat McGrath? No. Does it feel like my experience with Natasha Denona? Probably not. Maybe a little bit. The performance of these shadows I would compare to how some of the new ColourPop metallic palettes perform. I love ColourPop eyeshadows, but I find that the newer palettes, like Going Coconuts, for example, the shimmers in Going Coconuts are very soft and creamy, and that is what I would compare this formula to. I also want to note another favorite thing that I forgot to mention before the swatches is the mirror. The mirror of this is amazing. It's very high quality. This whole like bottom magnet that's holding these shadows, as well as this thick top with a very sturdy mirror, is what makes this palette so heavy. And both of those things I greatly appreciate about this palette. I hate having mirrors in eyeshadow palettes that just are low quality, because what is the point? One of my very insignificant but very annoying pet peeves of mine is when a mirror that is not supposed to distort the image distorts the image. It almost gives me a headache whenever I look at it, and that could be from a sensory mismatch from what I'm expecting to see and what I'm really seeing, or it could be from rage. I have actually returned an empty magnetic palette that I bought from Amazon because it had like a funhouse mirror on it. And by the way, that is the All-One eyeshadow, empty eyeshadow palette, ALLWON, so I would not recommend that one. Even though the reviews are good, the one that I got had a funhouse mirror. Okay, now let me tell you how I created this look here. So firstly, I took a fluffy blending brush and fluffed Entice all over my eyelid and in the crease, as well as to the outer corner, and also I pulled this along my lower lash line as well. Then I went in with that same brush and added a bit of Trap to add some peachiness to what I already laid down, because Entice was fairly yellowish. And I also added Trap on top of what I had laid down along my lower lash line. The last matte I used to build my matte base is Quiver, and this is one of those shadows that has a very putty-like texture and very creamy texture. So I took that on a smaller blending brush and blended that into the outer half of my eye. Now for the lid shades, the shimmers, which is my favorite part. And so for the first shimmer, I took Provoke, which is one of the lighter bronzes in this palette, and washed that all over my lid. And after doing this, I took Catch, which is a more deep bronze, and I put that in between those two shades. For the lower lash line, I also took Catch and Provoke and put them in relatively corresponding spots. I put Catch more on the middle part of my eye, and then I added Provoke to the inner half of my lower lid. This palette actually doesn't have a lot of good highlighting shades because the tones are fairly like mid-tone, except for this one, but this has more of a pink color to it though, so I didn't really want to use it for this copper look. So for my inner corner, I actually just took Provoke and put it along the inner edge of my eye as well. The other like light option in here is Scent, but this is like a yellow green kind of shimmer, so I didn't want to add any green to this look either. Lastly, I took a thinner, almost kind of like a liner brush into Lure, which had a putty texture, so I just kind of was smushing the eyeshadow into the pan as I picked this up. But I took Lure and I dragged that along the outer third, outer quarter of my lower lash line and the same amount in on my top lash line. And this just kind of emphasizes the natural shape of my eye. I'm not trying to do anything dramatic here. I'm like emphasizing what I have. And I just threw on some mascara. Today I used the Essence Lash Princess as well as Glossier on my bottom lashes, and this is the final look. Summary of my final thoughts. You know, instead of a summary, I'm gonna tell you bullet points to sum up what I said. So bullet point number 1, it's heavy. Bullet point number 2, the pans pop out. So that's great for someone like me who likes creating my own palettes or rearranging my palettes. Point number 3, it has a very good mirror. Point number 4, the matte shadows can be difficult to work with, but only if you go in with the expectation of them working like a powder matte eyeshadow that you're used to working with. You saw in the application that I use these matte shadows with a brush, and if I just took a little bit of time to blend it in, it blends really nicely because it does have that creamier texture. It just doesn't do what you want a lot of the times, like right away. And for the shimmers are good, and they are akin to the best ColourPop shimmer eyeshadows, but they're not Natasha Denona or Pat McGrath, so don't go into this expecting that. And finally, should you go out and buy this? I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not gonna tell you whether you should buy this or not. What I do hope that I did for y'all today that was helpful was show you how this looks, how this performs, how this feels, some of the unique or positive characteristics that surprised me upon using it, as well as some of the negatives. Knowing what I know now about this palette, would I go out and spend $22 on it? I actually would. And a big selling point for me is that it includes a large number of shades just in smaller pans so they could fit more shades in here. And that's what I prefer because I don't hit pan on eyeshadows a lot. Y'all would know if you're following my Pan My Eyeshadows project of 2020, but I don't hit pan, and I prefer having a lot of eyeshadows to pick from, to pull from if I'm duping palettes, and this palette really does add to my collection. Now, if I didn't know what I know now, and I was just considering if I should buy this palette before touching it, before feeling it myself, I actually probably would have hesitated because it is $22. I do think that if you're deciding between this palette and say a 15 pan ColourPop eyeshadow palette, because those are around $20, I throw ColourPop away, and it hurts my heart to say that because y'all know I have so many ColourPop eyeshadows because it's my first love. It was affordable for me to try, the quality was dependable, but I would get this so many times over, say like the ColourPop Mulan palette that came out a while ago. I think that was around $20. The value is there for me, and I hope I helped you decide whether or not the value is there for you. Now, I also don't want this video to be just seem like me like selling anything. Even though I told you I'm not selling anything, I don't want it to be just like a review to help you decide to buy. I hope that it was also entertaining because I know a lot of us just watch makeup videos to entertain us, to pass the time, to kind of relax and chill when we're stressed, as Sally.exe has stopped working. This is $22, and the minimum for shipping is of course $25 on the Alter Ego website, but if you want, you can buy the, this eyeshadow primer for, I don't know how much it is, $6 I think, or you could get like a cheap $4 eyeshadow brush and throw that in, so you could get the free shipping without buying like a whole other palette. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for engaging with me and commenting and talking with me and just loving my content, because that lets me do what I do. Y'all are the only reason I'm here, truly. Remember that y'all are my treasure. Find the beauty in every day, but most importantly, be kind to yourself. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!